I want to start by building some trust because I know that I'm asking for your vulnerability. There's no need to share it with me, but I'm asking you to offer it to yourself, especially when it's safe enough to stretch beyond comfort and into opportunities of learning as you do this work. So I want to start by modeling showing up in vulnerability by sharing with you a bit of my story, how I came to this work and what has led me to craft this offering. My deepest harms brought me to this care work. That's the start of it. They prompted me to reach for and build up tools and toys in support of myself, along with lessons of holding from countless streams of community, queer ancestry, theory, and experience. For the purposes of this class, I'm going to focus primarily on the things that most specifically influence my genderqueerness. So I do want to offer you content warnings of non-graphic mentions of loss due to coming out, sex work, and rape. I'm also going to read the story from a teleprompter because it's fucking dense for me, and I don't want to get lost in searching for words. I can struggle to do that sometimes, so I've written it out in advance, and I'm going to share it with you because that's the way I'm able to show up. So I hope I'm also modeling for you, show up in the ways you're able. So here we go. So to set the stage, after graduating from a military school in rural Georgia, steeped in Southern Baptist and white Anglo-Saxon Protestant values, I went into my first year of college with a full scholarship for the U.S. Army. About halfway through the year, I began dating a woman, and I came out, and in doing so, I lost my family, my friends, my scholarship. That same year, I became marginally housed and eventually homeless. I was turned away from a women's shelter because my abuser was not a man. I was denied a restraining order because I was in an immoral relationship. And I was raped for the first time of what would be years of sexual trauma to come. The psychologist I saw asked me why I needed so much attention. She also knew my father professionally and told him directly that I blamed him for his lack of being present. That did nothing to help our riff. After a couple of weeks of forced psychiatric hospitalization, after many things I won't bother to get into, I came out with an understanding that my world had previously been held together with support that was contingent upon my being a good girl and doing as I should. And I said, fuck that. I packed what little I had and drove myself over 1,000 miles away to start over. At the time, I had begun dressing and identifying with a soft butch aesthetic and culture, partially to signal to and connect with LGBT communities, not an easy feat in rural Georgia. I also desperately wanted to hide my sexualized body from the onslaught of men. I felt aligned in myself in men's clothing with a shaved head and my breasts bound. I had a bit of a buffer from objectification, and I felt safer in many ways. I stopped getting harassed, stopped getting followed to my car, stopped feeling quite so scared walking down the street. That way of being had different flavors of fear and harm to be faced, to be sure, but none that I found to be so damaging as what I had sustained in a feminized body. Coded as a guy on first blush, the world treated me differently instantly, and it was obvious. It made me feel safer and therefore less disempowered. I was more obviously desired by other queers, which felt elating in my body, especially after so much intense loss sustained. I began volunteering with women's organizations and rooting into dyke cultures. I voraciously read books on queer and feminist theory, became involved in feminist and lesbian organizing, and finally found words to understand how the binary gender system enforces sexism, words I didn't have before. I began to understand that my gendering differently couldn't be unwound from my wounds. Though they feel in my body as though they were born separately, they've grown out of the same culture dish and environmental effects, now enmeshed and entangled together in symbiosis. As I gained access to safer therapy and community holding and support, I also came to deeply appreciate the old adage that if you're not angry, you're not paying attention. And I was fucking pissed. The dykes around me weren't talking about their experiences as feminized bodies, but the femmes were, and I deeply related to their pains. Mortified with them when I saw toxic masculinity showing up in masculinized AFAB bodies. I did not want to take that route. I wanted to feel safe and secure in my body no matter what I looked like or was assumed to be. I wanted to stand in my power the way I saw other prodoms and queer femmes boldly stepping into theirs. I became determined to find my way to a sense of alignment and safety within some sense of the social constructs of femininity and femaleness. I refused to continue to move into masculinity out of fear, even if that's not initially how I came to it, seemingly. So I stopped to take a U-turn and instead started creating blends and mixtures of gendering that allowed me to stay in touch with what I felt in my body, even as I was choosing to do something different. I did several years of full-service sex work and pornography to survive, eventually spending years as a professional dominatrix. I picked up and put down a variety of femme presentations, searching in solidarity with my own oppression and harms. I sought out women's groups and divine feminine moon circles, learned that I dislike garter belts, but I love vintage girdles and Cuban-heeled stockings. I created women's-only kink groups and sexuality events. I joined feminist book clubs, found shades of lipstick that I enjoy, and decided I hated foundation. I volunteered at domestic violence shelters and for women's advocacy campaigns. I sought sisterhood and solidarity everywhere, with others working to embrace and uplift intersectional feminism. Attending butch events, I felt like I wasn't enough, wasn't masculine enough, wasn't this or that enough. Attending femme events, I felt like I was a fraud, like I was pretending, I was trying to fit in. At trans events, I received wildly mixed messages, of course, of acceptance and not. And throughout it, I stayed my course. I was committed to courting love and embodiment for the feminine, whether I decided to stay there or not. Simultaneously through this, I found culture, history, and belonging amongst butch femmes, leather dykes, radical fairies, queer and trans activists within the Oakland, California area. So many beautiful fucking subcultures brimming with gender fuckery and mischief. It's this stew that forged my dedication to gender liberation, beyond the constructs that uphold sexism. These people and spaces, they helped me find my way to my individual identification with the term rheostat. A rheostat is a light dimmer. It refers to a full spectrum rather than a mere binary switch. I embraced my path of variance as the destination itself, not trying to get anywhere in particular. We may choose what looks like a cis-binary path without it being so. It's not about the window dressings, it's about the ways we show up in support of the change we want to see in the world, no matter the image. I spent nearly a decade, typically in feminine fashions, but always with my own flavor of unshaven dyke, my own brand as an insistent feminist killjoy. I learned to find my blends of joyful gendering in spaces that were safer enough to show up how I wanted. Concoctions of mask femme swirls of clothing and accessories. At events and parties, I would often have a costume change, moving from butch to femme, only to end up naked again. These were the gendering joy moments I clung to, I reached for, when I had to put on professional wear, knowing my queer ways of being were going to be a point of discontent for others. As a gendering artist, I seek to manipulate so-called masculinity, femininity, and otherwise, in ways that extend beyond what is seen. I strive to show up in alignment with what I want, knowing that because of safety, comfort, or other social reasons, I will not always choose the window dressing I desire. But I can always show up in alignment with my genderqueer values and ways of being that push up against gender assumptions and norms, even if I'm not seen in that way, when it's safe enough to do so. And that is a great fucking resource for me. Knowing that my values, commitments, and authenticity are present, whether physically seen or recognized by others or not. I'm not seeking their permission or approval. I'm not seeking my self-worth and their acknowledgement. I'm seeking to show up for myself in solidarity with the world building my communities are intent on crafting, and I want to be a fucking part of that. My presence offers alternative masculinities, and it showcases expanded femininities, and it highlights opportunities for integrating these into harmony. I can see many trans and cis-presenting people doing similar work in the world using their own methods of weaving that look different, yet similar. They direct us to demand liberation from binary constructs. No kidding, just the week before my double mastectomy, a man followed me through the subway making obscene comments about my breasts. And I was so fucking done with him, them, hems, them, all of it. A month after my surgery, the same man offered me a compliment on my hat as I entered the same subway station. I was gladdened to be seen as I desired in my skin, a person, and simultaneously filled with righteous anger as I realized the different hue of the increased physical safety I suddenly felt in my body because of the loosening of misogyny and sexism on my body. Just before the pandemic, I began playing with more gender technology, testosterone. I have no intention of living as a man, never have, and I'm pretty confident never will, though I do now inhabit one's body, according to the public eye. But I'm still the rheostatic genderqueer I've always been. I've just got a different shell. From my feminized body, I often heard phrases from kith and kin like, "You're actually like a really sweet guy on the inside," or "I love how masculine you are in bed," or "You're really emotionally distant like a man." Okay. Now that I'm in a masculinized body, guess what I hear? "You're so obviously a woman on the inside. I love how feminine you are in bed. You really bring the emotional intelligence that you learned as a woman." Fuck's sake. This is from queers and breaks my heart. And I I started wondering, like, what practices allow us to hold multiple realities, to embrace complexities as natural, to encourage interweavings of nuance and variance that allow for shifting tides of desires and ways of being that are not fixed. To know in our bones that we are more powerful than these constructs that are built to restrain us. And now I'm learning to walk in this new and unexpected body and part of my path, seen and treated as usually an effeminate gay man and most always assumed to be trans feminine. I'm letting go of lessons that no longer serve me from this shape, and I'm finding new ways to harness the lessons that continue to serve. I'm also learning brand new ways in which to push up against gender constructs, sexism, and many other oppressions from this positionality. I'm grateful to have these opportunities because I put my trust in knowing that our individual change can rise into a cacophony that changes cultures when we support one another in this work to show up and model the world we want to see. And perhaps the ways you show up in your values, commitments, and desires are utterly different from mine. Awesome. I don't think comparisons serve any importance here, just the showing up. I have 2 desired outcomes in creating this course. May you find supportive tools and ways to play and care for yourself to be ever more present and at ease in your path of authenticity. And may this increase the support you offer others doing the same for the sake of gender liberation.